everyone, welcome to the second edition of the Infinite Multihued. It's nice to see you again. As usual, I'm Francisca, and today we have Shayne Swift, who is a very important person to me. She's one of the few people who I had discussed Amadia Academy Limited to when we started, especially when we started here in the US. She's going to be sharing her personal story with us. The theme of today's episode is my mosaic piece. And what we're trying to bring out from this episode is to understand each person as an individual, not as a collective being, because it's in the process of understanding each person's personality that we're able to appreciate the beauty of their uniqueness. So let's go straight to it. Can you please introduce yourself to us today?
Yeah, so thank you for having me, and it's so good to see you. My name is Shayne Swift. I am a wife, a mother of a now college student, which is challenging to be an empty nester, but also brings some excitement. I am a house music lover and an ADHD coach.
Very, very interesting. Looks like you have a lot in your pockets. Let me put it that way.
Yes.
All right. So, very interestingly, you are an ADHD coach, and that's one of the reasons why we have you here, because definitely you've had to speak with individuals who are ADHD, especially people who have been recently diagnosed and trying to find their way around, balancing their everyday life. But before we get there, I'd like you to explain to us your experience. What was your experience like growing up?
Well,
We actually believe that
um,
each individual's experience growing up has a way of influencing who they are today. And so we get to
yeah,
ask, what was your experience like growing up?
yeah. Well, my experience growing up was, I would say, pretty unique, challenged in some ways. So I was mostly parented by a single mother who had a disability. And also, I was undiagnosed with my ADHD for a pretty long time. Um, Living in DC at the time, and there was a lot happening in DC. That was during the crack epidemic. But my mom had support from her parents, and my mom has had a really interesting background. She was a classic pianist and had this real love for music, even though she wanted us to learn an instrument. I wasn't really interested in learning an instrument. So she tried to get us on the piano. I think I tried the clarinet and the flute for a while, but didn't really have much of an interest in playing an instrument. But I had a keen interest in the arts, in
Okay.
particular. So I spent
Yeah.
a lot of time learning dance, and never really considered myself an artist, but considered myself pretty artsy and creative. And I think that has definitely influenced my pathway as a person,
Mhm.
in terms of the career that ended up pursuing prior to becoming an ADHD coach.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of things with painting, even as a coach.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's good to hear. So when did you eventually get diagnosed?
I was 38
Oh, wow.
when I was diagnosed. So it was much, much later in life. I had actually managed to get through college, get through a master's program, um, had a significant number of years of teaching under my belt, but I knew that something just was not clicking. And I was able to always hold myself together in my professional life. But it was almost like, as soon as I would get off of work, it was like a huge exhale for me.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't really able to hold myself together well in my personal life because I was spending so much energy holding myself together in my professional life.
Wow. Do you think if you had been diagnosed earlier, it would have made a lot of difference?
Oh, absolutely. It would have made a lot of difference. Just the awareness of
Mm-hmm.
um, what I was navigating, understanding like what the different executive functions are, and how they are operating in my life or not operating in my life. And there's certain executive function challenges that I don't have issues with. So, for example, like goal directed persistence, like if don't tell me I can't do something. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do it. If it's
Yeah.
something I want to do, I'm definitely going to get it done. And I love when people tell me I can't do something, like that fuels me to get it done even more. But
Mm-hmm.
things like opening the mail on a regular basis, like I found that to be a challenge. So the mail would pile up and chores would pile up at home. But, was I the teacher that didn't grade stuff on time? Absolutely not. I graded stuff on time. Lesson plans were always done. But because I was exerting so much energy in my professional life, my personal life
Your
was just
personal
kind of,
life suffered a
but
bit.
absolutely, it suffered not a little bit, a lot of bit. A lot of bit. Yeah.
Um, I'm actually learning. I'm actually learning from here. So I'd also want to ask, what was your first reaction when you got your diagnosis?
The light bulb had gone off. Oh, so that was the initial reaction, and then it was kind of a oh, and then it was a oh, like I wish I had known, all this time. So it was a mix of shock, grief, anger, um just a range of emotions. And so, like in the workbook that I wrote about the stages of grief, so when we think about when someone passes away and we go through
Mhm.
that process of grieving that person, all of those stages of grief that we go through when we lose a loved one, I experience those things just as a part of grieving the person that I thought, the person I thought I was, for all of those years, for 38 years, who I thought I was, and really having to now
Yeah.
understand who I am as a neurodivergent, so it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of reclaiming my identity now, with this totally new component that is integral, to who I am as a person. But what I really appreciate about the stages of grief, I think the thing that people don't really talk about. So, for example, when someone goes through the grief process, if they've been given a cancer diagnosis, and you see these folks who overcome a battle with cancer and become like huge advocates, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see them on the news champion other people to, get through that diagnosis and become advocates themselves. I feel like that's what I'm doing now as a coach. I've become an advocate for people with ADHD. I'm out of the neurodivergent closet, so to speak, and I'm proud to be a neurodivergent because I understand the strengths that I bring to the table
Mm-hmm.
because everybody doesn't think like me,
Yeah.
so I'm creative. And so the strengths that I bring to the table, other people don't. And so now I'm appreciative, despite the challenges, I'm appreciative of the things that I bring to the table that other people don't bring to the table. And, having me on your team means, there's a flair, there's, stuff that I bring that others won't, um, a lens, if you will, that neurodivergent folks really bring to the table,
Mhm.
um, that may give an organization an edge, perhaps. Um, and we talk about that, like in the online community that I run, you know, providing that support to each other to know that, yes, we are in here all together working on executive function challenges, but what about pattern recognition? What about being able to see from the 30,000-foot view a vision that other people can't see until 2 years later, or being able to put something together in a super creative way that
Mhm.
others may not be able to see. So those kinds of things, are the things that I think have taken me, from the age of 38 to now to really cultivate, over time. It's not a one day thing where you're like, yes, I have these strengths too. But processing the grief and then coming to the realization that, um, I'm strengths based too. And
Mhm.
these are the ways that I'm strength based.
Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. Like you said, the grief process is starting from one experience and then going to the other, and then you eventually get to the point where you tell yourself, I can handle this. I can go beyond this. That's
Yeah.
interesting to hear. And I'm sure a number of people will learn from your stories because on a daily basis, people are getting to learn, uh, you know, who they really are, especially being different from who they thought they were for a very long time. But I want to ask, did you ever feel stigmatized at the initial stage? Because I know it's just up until recently, people have not been able to come out to say, this is who I am. I think in the Western world, in the like this part of the world, it's getting people are able to embrace their neurodiversity and neurodivergent cells. But where I come from, it's not until maybe a few years back that people started talking about it. But even at that, there's still a lot of stigma attached to it. It's as bad as at some point that even up till today, people believe that it's more of like a spiritual thing, not a mental or physical thing. And so they rather want to address it in places of religion rather than going to the hospital to get the right diagnosis and all of that. So when you got your diagnosis, was it like, did you experience any form of stigmatization? Did you think, oh, I wouldn't be able to blend in anymore? Did you think people were going to look down on you in one funny way or the other? Or did you think people were going to change the way they perceived you?
Well, I think I had a responsibility as an educator to not
Mhm.
think that way. Um, you know, I got my master's degree in curriculum and instruction, for a very specific reason. And
Okay.
the reason was, I know that even though I couldn't name what was happening with me, there are people that learn like me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what it is, but I wanted to make sure that I could reach everybody in my classroom. So I was one of those teachers that was made fun of. Oh, there she is again, doing those projects. And we really need our kids to write. Now, I was an English teacher, and my kids used to write all of the time. They went to the next English teacher prepared to write. We don't have to do it day in and day
Day
out
out.
for it to be good. So I'm the type of teacher that likes to iterate on a few writings instead of, I'm quality over quantity. We
Mm-hmm.
don't have to, browbeat kids with writing for them to be good
Good
writers.
writers. True.
um but I liked projects because I liked kids to have different entry points. So any student that was in my room that had ADHD, once I was diagnosed, I felt a responsibility to say it out loud to help them feel normal in the classroom, even if no one else in the classroom knew they had ADHD except for me.
For you.
So I had a responsibility to normalize it in my professional setting. Now, in my personal life, that was a different story. I didn't know how my family would feel about it, but I knew that I had a cousin who had been diagnosed because he was younger than me. And
Okay.
so I told my family. Um, More recently, I was out to dinner with some students who are first gen students in the United States, and their parents are Cameroonian and Nigerian. And I remember we were out at dinner, and one student had already told me, I suspected he had ADHD when he was in high school.
Mhm.
And he actually got a diagnosis as an adult. And one student had dismissed, gone to the restroom, and we were chatting. They're adults now, and they're doing great. And we were chatting about ADHD, and the other student returned from the restroom and said, "Hey, what are you all talking about?" And we said, "We're talking about ADHD." And he lifted his hand up. He's like, "Oh, that's not a real thing." And we started laughing. And I said, "Yeah, of course it's a real thing." And he said, "No, it's not a real thing." He said something like, "That's other people's problems. That's not a real thing." So I said to this other student, I said, "I have ADHD, right?" He said, "No, you don't, Miss Swift." "Yes, I do." He said, "For real?" I said, "Yeah, I have ADHD." For real, for real? I said, "Yes, I have ADHD." He said, "I never would have known that because you seem like you have it all together."
Mhm.
And I think there's the way that it presents itself in people, it presents itself very differently.
Differently.
And so I'm one of those people that's great at masking in my professional environment. Um, I'm able to hold it together in a
Yeah.
professional environment. So you would never know, that I
Hmm.
had ADHD for that reason. Well, I'll take that back. If you ever came into my office or looked at my desk as a teacher, then you should have known ADHD because it was messy.
Yeah.
But I think because teachers can tend to keep a lot of stuff, right? They just
Hmm.
have materials and stuff. Maybe students just chalked it up to Miss Swift just has a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was an interesting conversation, that we had at dinner. It was just me catching up with two students, and ADHD just happened to be a topic of conversation. Um, but I noticed that, you know, it wasn't stigma, but I found myself kind of reevaluating my friendships with people and thinking about whether or not people would really understand.
Understand you and accept you
Yeah,
for who you are.
understand. Yes, like understand me as a
Mhm.
person who is now um, recognizing like the challenges that I've been dealing with, but
Mhm.
also really thinking about all of the facets, all of the things that come with ADHD. So, for example, rejection sensitive dysphoria. And so I think it was more about me evaluating, do I really want to continue to be friends with this person? Have I maintained a friendship with this person because I've been afraid that I'm going to disappoint them or whatever the case may be? Have
Mhm.
I kept this person in my life um, maybe not for great reasons. Is this person a toxic person? So really it was for me to kind of reevaluate, myself, um, with this new information that I have, and evaluate the people that are in my life and
Around
whether
you.
or not they needed to stay.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to ask how ADHD has affected your personal and work relationship, but somehow you've talked about it. So I actually think it's really important to, at all times, evaluate those in your life and see those who are going to be of support and strength to you. And then those who are eventually going to tear you down, it's best to just let them go. It's easier to
Yeah,
protect your peace than, and
right.
talking
And I think,
about having conversations with your students and the one who doesn't even believe ADHD is a thing. Unfortunately, it's still that way in most part of Africa. I am Nigerian, and so like I said earlier, most of these things we tend to, or we used to tend to see it as a spiritual thing, or someone who has ADHD is just probably disorganized and stubborn and not ready to work, not is being lazy. Someone who is autistic is just too playful. And unfortunately, autism has, different, we all have, everything has different symptoms and, different levels. And so they just decide to see each person as their flaws without trying to understand what exactly is going on within them. And well, people are trying to come up now to speak about, neurodiversity. And as much as a number of people are accepting it, people are still saying it is not a thing. People are still saying it is spiritual. Oh, if we take her to the church or to the mosque or to the shrine and they pray for her and they do some things and then she'll feel better. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. And families are broken. Families are ashamed to come out to seek for help. But this is life, and the best thing is to find the easiest way to manage this. And then why I named this my mosaic piece is trying to see each individual as they are and then embracing them as they are and helping us to understand their beauty, appreciate the beauty of their personality in the society. Someone from a distance could hear, okay, Shayne is has ADHD, and it's easy to write you off. Whereas you have very strong personalities and characters and that people should learn from. So talking about neurodiversity from time to time, continually raising awareness and helping people understand that anybody who has been, whether diagnosed or not, has something beautiful to bring to the society. Like you had said earlier, you're able to, sit down and think about creative things that people who are not neurodivergent would not be able to see. But because of the way you are, you're able to see things ahead of time. You're able to think ahead of time and put things in place. And then every other person is just taking it with the flow. And then by the time they get to where you are, they find out you have moved ahead of them because you've been able to sit down and think ahead of the future. You've been able to sit down and
right.
project things ahead of time. So everyone should make it a point of responsibility to embrace people regardless of their neurological abilities or differences. So I'm going to ask you two more questions and then we'll call it a wrap. One is, what's one unique thing about yourself that you think the world needs to know about?
Well, I said, like I said earlier, I always saw myself as artsy, but never saw myself as an artist.
Mhm.
And, I would say in 2024, when I left the education realm, you know, working remote, I didn't realize how challenging working
It
remote was
was.
going to be. And I was in a grief process once again, um, grieving being around people all the time. Right, I'm an extrovert and I like to talk, that was one of the reasons that I think that was one of the struggles of diagnosis for me early on. With girls in particular, people didn't realize during that time that ADHD symptoms show up as, being talkative and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, my mother didn't, even though she was an elementary education major in college, did not recognize that that was a symptom, did not recognize that me losing house keys all the time was a symptom, or losing homework papers, or saying I would do something tomorrow
Later.
instead of today. She just didn't recognize it, So I was really angry with her in particular, because, there was a lot of tug between my mom and I about my executive function challenges. It really was. But I was always creative, and my mom really appreciated that about me, and always looked for ways to support my creative endeavors.
Okay.
And so, when I was going through, you know, my detachment from just being in a school every day and being
Mm-hmm.
around kids every day, I started doing digital art. I just kind of stumbled across it, started experimenting with it, and started really enjoying it. And that creative process, like, I do it every day. It is a non-negotiable. I must do digital art every day. And for a few reasons. One, it helps with the executive function challenge of emotional regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've seen tremendous improvement in terms of emotional regulation in myself. And so that's why I became an expressive arts coach as well. Two, um, it helps with all of the other executive functions for myself. Um, its impact on my other executive functions has been amazing to me, because I'm putting together digital stories. And so, it takes planning and prioritization. If I can't get to what I'm working on right now, when can I work on it later on, because my clients come first, of course, but when can I get to it? And so all of this process has just really helped me. And I would encourage anyone that has ADHD to figure out, like, what your creative process is, that you could commit to on a regular basis that could support you. Like, I have a client that DJs, and he absolutely loves that. I have a client that journals, and she absolutely loves that. So what is your thing, that gives you that outlet, right? Because folks with ADHD, sometimes the words don't come, but to be able to express yourself through movement, through sound, through music,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is creative, that the way that you want to express yourself, I just find that that's super important. Um,
Important.
yeah, and it's been super important for me in my life for years. So before becoming a mid-journeyer, doing digital art, it was dancing to house music. Before it was dancing to house music, it was doodling. Before it was doodling, it was, taking modern jazz or doing Tai Chi. It's always been something
Something.
creative,
Mm-hmm.
that helps to sustain me.
Thank you for sharing so much about yourself. Not everybody feels open to sharing, and definitely, I personally have learned a number of things, and I'm sure people who people listening are definitely going to learn something too. The last question is, I want you to talk about your coaching session, your coaching organization. How can people get involved? how do people find you on social
Mhm.
media, or just in case somebody needs to talk to you? You're the coach. If somebody needs to say something to you or needs some advice from you, how do we find you?
So I have a website, swiftlyfe.com.
Okay.
Life is spelled with
We
a
are going to
Y.
put the Swifts, we are going to put the website at the bottom. So,
Okay.
yep.
And I'm on all of the social media platforms,
Mm-hmm.
literally all of them.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn. And so people can reach me through any of those channels. Literally, when I say all of them, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll be sharing
Yeah.
all of that information. So anybody listening and is interested in getting in touch with Shayne, Shayne is a very, very experienced person. I have spoken with her. Like I said, when we started Amadia in the US, she was one of the people I spoke with because I had followed her closely on LinkedIn. She posts very, very interesting, educational, and inspirational posts on LinkedIn. I learned from her. And like I was telling her, somebody had reached out to me a few weeks ago to say, oh, I saw this post on LinkedIn and I think you should follow her. And I started laughing. I said, this is somebody that I follow. This is somebody I have had a prior conversation with. And this is somebody that I'm still going to have a lot of things to do with. I learned a lot from Shayne, especially as an ADHD coach. Thank you so much, Shayne, for joining us today. It's been a privilege to have you take out time for this, especially since the information was really, really short. We have learned a lot from you and we'll definitely be calling you back. Thank you so much for spending time with us and have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.